I think it's time that we talk about social murder. It's an important concept, but what is it? Is it a legal categorization of an action that violates the law? No, it's actually kind of the complete opposite. It is a philosophical term used to describe oppressive social, economic, or political systems that lead to unnatural and premature deaths, but which are nonetheless facilitated by the status quo and often perpetrated by the ruling class against the most vulnerable in society. It was originally coined by Friedrich Engels in 1845 as a contrast against deaths caused by direct violence. Engels, of course, was a revolutionary socialist and close friend of Karl Marx, and they had pretty substantive criticisms of the social, economic, and political systems that took form in the 1800s. Capitalism. Although the origins of capitalism are pretty complex and not clear-cut. Nonetheless, this period of heavy industrialization, the Industrial Revolution as it was called, was a time when workers often died as a direct result of their working conditions, working long hours in unsafe environments with little protection. Not to mention that they were paid starvation wages, and it wasn't uncommon for poor people to starve or freeze to death. Meanwhile, the industrialists filled their bellies with the wealth created off of the labor of those below them, the workers who died in this terrible system. This is the context in which the phrase was coined. The inhuman system of exploitation that enriched a handful of people at the cost of the lives of workers was the quintessential form of social murder. Now, I want to mention a few modern examples of social murder that are of utmost relevance. The US healthcare system is perhaps the prime example of an economic and political system that facilitates the unnecessary deaths of tens of thousands of people every year. People who are uninsured or underinsured are effectively barred from the healthcare that they need, or insofar as they get it, are so crushed by medical debt that they risk losing their homes and ending up on the streets. Even someone who does have adequate insurance has to pay not insignificant amounts of money out of pocket before their insurer even considers picking up the slack, and when they get to that point, they might find that their application has been rejected because the insurance company, which is an unnecessary middleman that adds nothing of value, arbitrarily decided that the treatment the doctor prescribed isn't necessary, or, reading between the lines, too expensive and thus detrimental to the bottom line of the insurance company. The fact is that insurance companies have a perverse incentive to deny care, because paying for people's care is their main expense. Cutting that expense increases profits. People's lives be damned. This is a form of social murder. Another example is the violation of the human right to bodily autonomy, and in the case of women, as well as some trans men and non-binary people, abortion. After the US Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and conservative legislatures in red states passed laws banning abortion, a number of American women have died as a direct consequence of those laws. This is a form of social murder. And no, abortion is not social murder or any other kind of murder because fetuses aren't people. Women, however, are people. It would be easy to mention many other forms of social violence women are subjected to, but in the interest of both sidesing the gender wars, I think you could also reasonably argue that the male loneliness epidemic that leads to men disproportionately ending their lives is also a form of social murder. But it's caused by male socialization and patriarchal social norms that tell men to be closed off, suppress their emotions, never be vulnerable, open, or sincere, and by reactionary influencers who sink their greedy teeth into young boys, exploit their insecurities for monetary gain, and radicalize them into inceldom, reactionism, and outright fascism, thereby erasing these young boys' futures. Then these young boys become men who themselves contribute to the exact same social systems that destroyed their lives in the first place. That's the social murder that is happening with that whole thing. Turns out it's not conducive to happiness to get radicalized into a hateful, self-pitying, and misogynist cult. Women understandably don't want to date men who hate them, but men aren't just dating less now than they used to anyway, they also have fewer friends. That's because men, despite it all, also don't want to socialize with emotionally unavailable, insincere, and hateful losers. A further example of social murder is the growing and reactionary oppression of trans people. Reactionary movements in many countries have sought to both politically and socially ostracize trans people and force them back into the closet, deny them their life-saving healthcare, deny them their right to exist in public spaces. This has led to stochastic terrorism and other forms of direct violence, as we saw with the murder of Breonna J., which I guess doesn't technically meet the definition of social murder because it's just straight up murder, but there is an undeniable social component there that can't be ignored. Breonna J. was murdered, but she was murdered in a social, political, and cultural context. She was murdered, but she was also socially murdered by all the hateful people who have participated in the moral panic over trans people's existence, by everyone who has vilified trans women as threats to cis women, and by everyone who has painted trans people as dangerous groomers by virtue of their existence. But even setting aside this very real stochastic violence, the social and political systems that are being fostered by reactionary transphobes won't eradicate transgenderism, because that's not possible. Trans people just exist. That's a fact of reality. What that will do, however, is force trans people into dark and lonely places that leave them vulnerable to suicidal ideation. The purpose of a system is what it does. In my last video essay about Leila Alcorn, watch it, it's really good, I talked about exactly that, how she may have killed herself in a direct sense, but it was her transphobic parents, her transphobic community, and her transphobic society that put her, nay, forced her, on this path. This is a form of social murder. Okay, so who's to blame for social murder? Engels blamed the bourgeoisie for the deaths of proletarians who succumbed to the horrific working conditions of the Industrial Revolution. That makes sense, considering the bourgeoisie is a small yet powerful group of individuals that controls the means of production and enjoys a great degree of influence over politics, as we've seen now that oligarchs very plainly and obviously bought the US government more than they already had. But pointing at a culprit isn't always possible, because social murder relates to social, economic, and political systems. This can be something as nebulous as social norms. Who's responsible for social norms? In specific cases, we can identify individuals who engaged in behavior that led to social murder. We can also broadly identify political parties, organizations, or movements whose ideological agendas lead to social murder. But I think at some point we have to let go of that cathartic urge to pin the blame on someone and instead settle for the underwhelming fact that we are affected by subtle and pervasive systems, and it is these systems that need to change. That's not to say we shouldn't hold bigots or oligarchs accountable. We absolutely should, and I think it is in fact vital that we do so, especially considering the amount of power oligarchs have. But that alone will never be enough. Pointing at individuals to blame will never be enough unless the underlying systems also change. We need systemic change for systemic issues. Social murder as a concept is very important because we as societies tend to be shocked and mortified by direct acts of violence, rare as those are, but we are passively accepting of systems that lead to untold numbers of deaths. That's just baked into the system, hidden in plain sight, taken for granted. We often forget the very real human cost of bad systems, of bigotry, even when it stares us in the face. Why care about the thousands of slave laborers who died building football stadiums in Qatar? That would get in the way of the football. Why care about homeless people freezing to death in the streets? Let's just pretend that they can and should bootstraps out of it on their own and don't deserve our compassion for their individual failures. I think we need to take a step back and re examine our priorities, especially at this point in history when we are on the precipice of the greatest social murder we might ever experience. Foolish like the frog in the slowly boiling pot, we refuse to seriously contend with the implications of climate change, no matter how many millions of human beings will die as a result, just so a handful of billionaires don't have to sacrifice their wealth and power. This is a form of social murder. Now you know what social murder is. I'm closing in on 1,000 subscribers, which will allow me to monetize my videos. I've promised my girlfriend to treat her to a cheeseburger when the cents start rolling in. So subscribe if you haven't, if you like the videos. It's free and would make me happy. If you enjoy my work and want to help me make more, consider supporting me on Patreon or by becoming a channel member. In addition to being credited as a backer at the end of these videos, you'll also get access to exclusive posts, mostly... Hang on. Mostly photos of this young lady, as well as her sister. Say hi to the camera, Sully. There it is. Say hi to the nice people. Tell the nice people to like, comment, and subscribe. Anyway, thanks, and we'll see you next time, or last time if you go back in time and watch a previous video. Trippy. Anyway, say goodbye to the camera, Sully. Say goodbye to the camera, Sully. She's not saying goodbye. Alright, here you go. Step there. There you go. Alright, now you're blocking me. That's excellent. Alright, you're sniffing the camera. No, not the camera, the mic. Sniffing the mic. Oh, there we go. Turning around. Oh, big yawn. The camera did not catch that, though. Here you go, Sully. Alright, come on. Sit. Oh. Sit here. No. Sit. Oh, there you are. The camera is focused on me. Can I? Oh, there. That's perfect. Oh, look at how pretty she is. She's such a pretty cat. Such a noble, majestic lion, you know? Alright. Fine, Sully. Fine.